Greetings, Nick with Sweetwater here, and I'm here with 4 Marshall Plexi lunatics, in the best possible way, by the way. Mr. Pete Thorn.
Yes.
Mr. Blues Saraceno, and James Santiago from UA, who's just developed the amazing, with his team, the new UAFX Lion 68 Super Lead amp pedal. So we're messing around with it. So what's the premise of this video, apart from us playing licks?
Well, you know, in discussing Marshalls, we talked about it. It doesn't look like much when you look at the panel. Volume, treble, middle, bass, presence. How can you mess that up? You can. I've learned by taking it to the wrong gig or not knowing how to set it up, or it's too loud. But if taking that away from it, if given the free space to use the amp in the way you could, it has every tone from clean to dirty to the searing leads. So how do you get that? And the ability for us to maybe take this platform and just put in some favorite settings, because everyone's gonna go, well, I use channel 1 and I blend a little 2 in. I like mine Variac down. I like Celestions. I like a mix of JBL. I like V30s, 25s, G12H30s. Like, we're all gonna be a little different, but we've also played the game. If we all walked up to the same amp, you know, taking the guitar out of the picture, we'd still all sound different. You're still going to sound like you no matter if you're playing this guitar and this one. So I think it's interesting to see how we can influence each other. I want to try your setting with what I'm doing, change guitars, and just see where we land, because we've all had great and probably bad experiences with these Marshalls. Mm-hmm. And no one Marshall is great for everybody. I'm sure you found one that I would probably hate, and I have one I hate that would be perfect for you.
I like your Marshall. I'm not mad at your Marshall.
Damn it!
I don't know where all the
mine.
hate's coming from.
Can I have all your Marshalls?
Yeah, it's
Nick's
true.
on the other hand.
Yeah, define hate.
Yeah.
Define hate.
Define hate, because I think depending on whether I want it to be an aggressive rhythm amp or I'm looking for that squishy, buttery, like blues breaker thing, that could be 2 different versions of that Marshall. It could be the one with the tube rectifier. It could be a 50. Maybe you're looking for a blues breaker. Maybe you are a super lead. You know, there's those little variations that make us like one amp and want to sell it a week later. What happens? What is the situation? So I know when I started playing right now, I go right down the center if I'm holding a Strat. Like, how do I get a broken up Jimmy clean Strat sound? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of where I'm at now. So I'm actually using the browned out amp.
Okay.
With, like, if I put the volume at like noon, in this case, I have the bright cap in there, but I will say, here's a topic of discussion. I took out the 5,000 puff bright cap out of the 68.
Oh, you did?
Way too much.
Okay.
And put in 100 picofarad, which is actually more like a JTM 45, so you can actually get a clean sound, as opposed to all the amps I had when I was a kid. When someone goes, dude, you know you could take that, there's a cap you could snip out of there. First thing I did was take it out of my amps.
So did you do that on the brown on this pedal?
On the brown, you can have no cap,
Okay.
and you can put 100 picofarad. You can put a cap back in.
Okay.
So if you use it, so I like it as a clean platform. So if I use it at noon, it's almost got the squish of an AC30 because it's browning out, but it's got the jangle. Put some reverb on that and delay, and it's like the coolest. That's a great clean sound.
Yeah.
And that's typically a setup you use for what we call Eddie-inspired rock.
It's the 100 picofarad is interesting. It's from because I've messed a lot with bright caps over the last few years, and I'm actually to your point.
Oh.
I'm a 4,700 or 5,000 guy, and but I do like the 100 picofarad because it basically presence. I mean, it's like just
air,
adding a sparkle.
jangle.
But the thing I learned that for me and what I like, it makes the amp a total one-trick pony. You can't use it below 5. It's just a mess of high end. But as you're blending in more and more of that volume, more and more of the lows and mids are coming in. You hit 6 or 7, and it's like, it's magic.
There it
it's
is,
a one trick, but what a trick.
Yeah.
And that's
You know, and another thing to point out is that a lot of people don't really understand what a bright cap is. So for example, when I was learning to play, I would use the old Marshalls, and basically it's like this. It's kind of like in a Fender amp. It's like the bright switch. If you turn the volume on 1, the bright cap is very much engaged, meaning it's rolling off your low end. It's kind of like a bright switch on a Fender amp. If you turn the amp up on 10, just volume, it has no effect at all.
Yeah.
So the reality, it's kind of on a sliding ratio. It's in, let's say, 90% at 1, and let's say, I don't know, no percent at 10. So people should understand that, because the problem a lot of people had with Marshalls is especially 100 watt. I mean, they are freakishly loud, and especially by today's standards, where music is and where it's going. And in the 70s it was guitar bass, so you could guitars were in the forefront. Now it's the DJ's the star. So in the perspective of things, and so what happens is as you turn the volume in, you bring in. It's almost kind of like it's almost like the old treble boosters. Like it's almost like this weird roll off. I personally hate them. So
you take all yours out then?
I instantly, and I will say this, in the studio environment, if you can control where they get tricky is, let's take like a 50 watt. A 50 watt really around 6 on the volume scale is really where they kind of get their tightest bottom and the good solid gain. If you want more gain, you turn them up, but then you start getting a little bit of flubby. So the problem is, what I really want to control with a 50 watt Marshall is more just the gain and the tightness of it, more so than the EQing factor. So that's why on 50 watts I yank them out instantly, because I don't love them. I will say I do have a small box small box 50 that Dave built, and I do actually use the bright caps, but only in the in-studio environment when you can, let's say you're running it into a load box of sort where you can really mess with the volume, but not necessarily mess with the volume in the room per se. So when you're really talking, you're using it kind of to paint your gain, then I use the thing. But in real world, I never. Those things suck.
Yeah. It's what you're saying. What you said earlier about it ceases to the louder you turn up the amp, the less it becomes. It's kind of like that fine line between clever and stupid, as they say in Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
Well,
like I did a demo on a Plexi a few years back, and from like 0.02 to 4, it was just ice picking the ear.
They're useless. They're
Then
horrible.
you get it to about 6, and it's brown and beautiful,
That's
and then you
bad.
go,
Exactly.
then you get past 8, and it starts to flub. So there's that magic spot.
It's like 6, now it's, and then 7, and then 7 and 0.5, and you're like, there's magic right there.
But
and
what's
without
also
the bright,
kicking in? But what else is kicking in? You're also messing with the gain part of it. So like if you can, it's weird. So you're kind of the problem with and then when you go to like a metal face, like a 69 or a 70 or 71. It's like a whole nother game. So personally, I highly recommend you just throw those things in the river.
And I think it also depends what speakers you're abusing.
we're gonna fight. We're gonna fight.
I like a little bright cap, but then I also don't like it either.
But I'm just trying. I mean, there's the reason why everybody dumped their Plexis before the load box thing, because they were just they were freakishly loud. So I'm just trying to be realistic to people that are sitting at home in their apartment. I'm like, enjoy those bright caps. You know what I mean? Because
So my answer is a switch. I have a switch, like an SL68, which is basically a 68 Plexi repro, but I got like no bright, I got 100 picofarad, and I got a 4700. I can
perfect.
switch between.
Yeah. Of course.
So then it's like,
there it is, everything.
But to me, my favorite rock sound, like not Van Halen. I'm talking about when the amp's on 7 or 8, and I got the tone control set. You know what I mean? Like the way I've got them set right here on this thing for rock sound, straight up rock sound. When it's on 7 or 7.5, just like I've got it right here, the equivalent of like, I don't know, what's that, 2:30 or 3 o'clock or something like that. That's where the 4700 is just like, to me, it makes it sound like a Marshall. It doesn't, it sounds like a slightly different amp without it. Maybe better for some things, but to me, the Marshall thing
Do you channel jump when you're doing that? Do you jump in channels?
Generally not. I don't mind jumping. That gets us in the whole nother, like you were mentioning the clean realm and the strat realm, jumping channels, losing a little gain when you do that. Out of and then also the EQ, I've learned I've lent my amp to David Grissom once, and I've got a nice 7150 watt. And when I got it back, I looked at the controls, and it was so interesting because everything was really low. The way that he'd had it set when he turned it off last. The mid's down around 2, the bass down around, and it was like, what's going on? And then I thought, of course, the EQ in a Marshall's super lossy. So it's like you want the cleanest sounds, and especially in the mid-range, turn those mids down.
Turn it down,
And the amp cleans up, and then you got this magic Strat amp, and then even with here's the other thing I learned about the crazy bright cap is that if you do blend the channels, that ice pick when it's on 2, actually if you primarily use channel 2, the fat channel, and then you just blend it in a little bit, it's like, there's enough where you just get a little clarity on the top. And
let's do that, because it's funny, we talked about it today, is I do the same thing. If I'm on the stock one, I start on 2 for volume, and then start bringing in 1, basically as high end.
That's high end.
It's
That's
high
it.
end. And
you
it's
got all your
exactly,
fat, and then
I can literally do it right here.
Which was Peter Frampton's old way. Like everyone would do the opposite way. They'd use channel 2 to bring in the lows. he'd do the opposite. He'd bring channel 1 in for the bright.
That's exactly what he told me, actually. Yeah, that he would primarily use the volume, you know, and he would plug into that second channel and then jumper
exactly.
to the.
So that's what's here. So there's the meat of my channel, and there's my high end coming in just a little bit.
So if I turn that way you play, that's it.
There's the jangle.
Yeah. And it's awesome. Where's the mid on the, sorry, which
right
controls the mid? So if we...
Pull that down, yeah.
You can hear actually more gain come in. It's like, oh, now we so cool.
But do you have to, someone would have to tell you, like, if you've never done this before, you don't think, well, I'm going to just blend the channels for an EQ.
Yeah.
You'd have to have some kind of mentor, someone go, dude, start on 2, then just use 1, because otherwise, this is too much, that's too dark. What do you do with this?
Yep.
And it takes someone to show you, because I had to learn it from the guy in town, going, dude, here's what you need to do before YouTube and all that was a thing.
Yeah.
So even that is like that's a hack right there. That's a secret trick.
It is kind of a, I had to, and really it was David because I always run the mid. I love the mid on a, but you know, it gets dirty. It's like there's a lot of gain in that mid range. And when we talk about Ed's amp, it had a unique mid in it. Right?
That pop was not the right value for that amp.
50K mid, which gives you a little more gain. And so it's like, especially on that, if you bring it down, you're going to notice less gain. So it's kind of, it's fast. We're off and running. It's like, you know, this is fascinating stuff.
I think this is great, and I think it also depends on the guitar. So how would you use that guitar and blend the 2 channels if you were doing that? Because right now, you're not really blending right now. Huh?
I'm not, actually. So, well, okay, so let's see here what I got. I dialed this up. This is my, like, basic, you know, setting that I would go to, where I've kind of got the mids. Actually, the mids were a little bit lower, so I'm going to turn those up to about 7 or 8. Got the bass on about 4. I got the treble on...
Okay, he just said something very important. The bass is low, and the last few times I saw Jeff Beck, that bass control on all his Marshalls was off.
Off, yeah. Yeah,
and
don't be afraid to run them off, right?
Yeah, turn it off.
Yeah, you can totally take it out. Maybe just there.
Just there you go.
Yeah, and it's cool. Like especially on a, you know, you've got base model amp in here too.
And that thing is, I think is way high headroom and big and boomy.
Right.
And no bright caps at all because it never had them. So.
Right. Never so full Malcolm Young, right? Like,
so what we got now, you're right.
So I'm bass on
is pretty low.
8 o'clock or something, and the mid's on. So if I'm. I almost never jumper or blend in the fat channel if I'm using humbuckers. It's a Strat thing for me.
Okay, so
Strats
then let's change.
So okay.
So if I give you this guitar, how would you do this?
Like my clean thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is this your?
That's a 56.
Oh Jesus! You handed me this, and I just
No,
went like,
no, it's been no.
Oh, it feels good. I wasn't even thinking about it. I thought it was a reissue or something. And then I
It is a
remembered you
reissue.
had one.
There you go. Now I think.
No, you handed it to me, and I was like, oh, it feels real. Okay.
Because that's a whole different gain structure. The minute you have to use a little bit lower output pickup, which technically PAFs aren't that hot either.
No.
Right.
They're not that much louder than a single coil sometimes. Oh, so you already have a great clean sound.
Well, I was just kind of. There we go. Yeah, I was doing using primarily the normal volume and then blending that guy in a little bit, but.
Oh, see. And you're on the bridge pickup, and it's not shrill either.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I've been finding I love the middle pickup lately.
It's a secret one, yeah.
Do you ever use middle pickup?
Yeah, I use them all.
Except for Ingve, he never uses it, right?
No.
Doesn't he he never
Ingve,
puts it down all the way and then doesn't use it, I thought.
And maybe Richie Blackmore, does he never use it? I don't think he ever used it, right? Get the magic in between.
That's a legit killer clean sound out of an amp that's supposed to be the greatest rock amp ever, and it is, but...
Yeah. It's beautiful sounding. Yeah, it's really nice. It's really great. Maybe even a little less bass, a little more of the treble channel. Yeah, sounds great like that.
Okay, so now that setting, what happens when we switch back to? So what does that sound like when you get back here?
Let's see. These are pretty PAF-y in this, so it should, if I go to the middle maybe, let's see what it does.
Too bad. Oh, that's nice.
But this is a, this is fascinating because it's like, the other thing about a Plexi is that it really shows different guitars.
Yeah, it
like,
does.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
They can be Plexis. I mean, you know, you can have a rough go with a Plexi if you're not, you know, if you didn't take your vitamins that morning. They can be, they're not, you know, they are not, you know, especially with a lot of. I'm just trying to think like compared to like what the new players say. They play real light, super legato. I mean, it's like it's a different world, you know.
Yeah, it's
so
very unforgiving amp.
they can be. They can be rough, but
It'll magnify your weaknesses
for sure. You know.
yeah.
to about 120 dB.
Exactly.
Right.
But to your point, that sound immediately changed.
Yeah.
Oh, big time.
And it still worked.
Yeah.
But I could hear the character of the guitar.
Yeah.
He's having an issue with this blanket. And he's Fender, sorry. I could hear the character of the guitar change, but also I think you would probably play differently too.
Yeah.
And some amps, not to say anything bad about certain amps with so much high gain, they make everything sound the same you put into it.
Absolutely.
Almost doesn't matter.
Yeah,
way
it's
more
like you're
homogeneous.
washing it
Yeah.
through, you know. It was just I kind of find that way certain about like I have an old Watkins Dominator. Like everything you kind of run through that becomes that Dominator sound, you
Yeah.
know, which is great. You know, that cool little EL 84 sound. So some amps are really great for that, and other ones you don't necessarily want that. Once again, it's different horses for different courses. To me, they all become spoons and forks, so they just use them. There's really no rules, to be totally honest with you. Like it's fascinating to watch how everybody sets them, and you know, like you said, this one that is the quintessential rock and roll tone of amps is used in so many different ways. You have the Eric Johnson approach, you have the Van Halen approach, you have the Hendrix approach. I mean, it's all the same stuff, but it's still the basic. In essence, the amps are so simple. They're kind of just like lawnmowers, to be real honest with you. I mean, you know, you can almost, if you have a good one, a healthy one, there's not that much difference between them, to be totally honest with you. I mean, I've had the difference between the good and the great is 10%, you know what I mean?
But how many of you bought over the years still looking for a good one?
See,
sorry.
That's a whole. But I will say times change too. In all fairness, too, because the reality was you show up at any kind of working gig with a 100-watt Plexi, and it's an instant no. You know, there's just there's no way. You can't, by today's standards, even unleash those things. So the invention of, let's say, like an aux box or a load box or the reactive loads or whatever, those really brought those kind of from being dinosaurs back into the mix. I mean, you know, that's really the truth of it. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you know, so the reality is, I was telling you guys earlier, before those came in, I dumped them all. I was like, I can't use these 100 watts. They're too much. They're just way too much. And so all of a sudden, then of course, the tides change. It's kind of like everybody wanted, you know, nobody wanted analog gear because, you know, they wanted things clean and pristine. And then when everything went digital, everybody's fighting to get back to analog gear now. You know what I mean? Because they want that character. And so that's kind of, to me, what's happening with the older vintage amps, let's say. They're really just character boxes now, and they become much more utilitarian.
Well, you know, I think in the same respect that Marshalls were too loud. Just look at the history of Fender, where a deluxe reverb is probably the most expensive used amp you can buy, and twins are almost free still.
Yeah.
Because they're just too loud and clean and brutal. And it's kind of always been like that.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because it's like, I feel like there's, you know, even just this past week on Instagram, Joe Bonamassa, there was a quote that was going around. Everybody was passing it around, saying where he said the biggest threat to, you know, electric guitar, I think it was the that it can't be over a conversational volume on stage by today's standards, by a lot of, you know. And it's like, when I go see a band, I'll use Government Mule as an example. Great band.
Yeah.
I mean, big amps up there. The bass player's got big amps. Warren's got big amps, and they have them. I mean, they're set for stun. But those guys are so dynamic that they're only at that. It's like when you go see Mike Landau play at the Baked Potato. He's got volume and he's got the ability to get loud, but he doesn't do it all the time.
Right.
It's like, you know, he's so dynamic in his playing, and maybe we've lost that a little bit, like the art of the volume control and gain staging.
Earlier. And being able to control the beast as well.
Muting and like knowing when to, you know, use it for dynamic effect to just blow people away and then like back off and be like, come back. I mean, Eddie did it. Even at, you know, he was always trying to, I mean, that was the original Variac thing, was trying to actually get a lower volume, and it worked. I mean, to a degree, it's like I find you get 3 or 4 dB less out of it. Like it probably makes the amp 60 watts or something.
Yeah, it's a lot quieter actually.
Yeah.
But to your point, there are players who know that they have that headroom that they could just hit you with.
Yeah.
And like I think even Beck he knew if he hit 10, he could live in 6 and 7,
Right.
and then use 10 to hold a note and so to get it to sustain and distort.
Yeah.
So he used it as like I just need that little extra bit there, and he knows he can live down here.
Kept it in reserve almost.
But you have to be smart to think ahead to go. And I will say, being on 10 is awesome.
Yeah.
But having those shades and knowing how to find the tones in here with the right amp is pretty amazing, because then there's so many other shades in there that are the combination of, this with maybe that's knocked off a hair.
Yeah, yeah. And it's
although I
so
don't think
beautiful. It's like all the beauty in there and stuff. If you're just on 10 all the time, you get that one sound, it's like burns you out after a few minutes, and it's like,
and there's no shades to it. Yeah, and Lando's like that. To your point, Lando's always riding this stuff and a volume pedal on top of it.
Constantly.
You're like, how's he getting that sound? It's like, we didn't change anything other than rolling this and play lighter.
Part of Mike's thing that is so amazing to me is him constantly changing the volumes and the tones, then picking by the bridge, and then he hits a fuzz like unexpectedly, and it's just like it's constant in it, but you never get the sense that it's like a gimmick or that it's like it's just him. It's like the sound of his brain coming through the guitar, his mind. It's so beautiful, in a very Beck. Like Jeff Beck was like that too. You know?
Just things are moving. You don't even see it happening. Where his pinky's grabbing this and grabbing a tone and the bar.
Yeah.
And to think that guy was getting better every year that went by too was just phenomenal.
Yeah, he was fascinating to watch, because he was as Pete said, it's not just what he was doing with these controls, it's how he's picking, where he's picking, he's using his fingers.
Yeah.
He's up here, he's down there, then he occasionally pulls his volume up to 11. Because he should do.
It's like watching a Hammond player. They work the drawbars,
they
work the things, they got
the
things.
And the
the
volume
foot
pedal,
pedals,
because there's no dynamics on a B3.
It's the old Jimmy Smith approach. It's like they paint so many, and at the end of the day, it's all, they're the wheel up, the wheel down, the tones. It's truly an art. I mean, it's really, and it's interesting because a lot of modern players today, because of just the times, they don't really have that as even a reference point. Like we were talking earlier, how many players truly haven't even played through a tube amp with speakers? That's nuts to me.
Right.
Like that's just so crazy, because just being of the generation that we are and growing up with the music we did, you almost were forced into happy accidents. Like it's the way things are today with everything being digital, and I love it. Like I said, I'm kind of like not loyal to anything other than the end result. So if it's all digital, awesome. If it's part digital, part awesome, awesome. If it's nothing, if we're sitting there banging on, pots and pans, that's awesome too. So without trying to be unbiased or have no loyalty to anything other than just the creative vision, it's interesting for someone like me that's fascinated, because learning how to wrangle digital, learning how to wrangle analog, and being able to paint with these colors, like I said, it's really something that's interesting. And I think the exciting thing for new players is they'll be able to go back and really kind of start going through these stages and realizing, wow, there's so much more out there than just this one line thing. And so I think that part's pretty exciting. But then there's idiots like me that just punch everything on 10 and just rip it and grip it, and that's cool too,
Yeah.
So.
But you have to have the ability to do that. And the weird thing is, here's another concept too, is there's nowhere to hide on a Marshall. There's no reverb. There's no tremolo. There's nothing. There's nowhere to hide in this thing. And it used to scare me when I first got one. Like, there is nothing covering me up. It's just big and loud and just right there. And you hear every mistake. And you have to learn that amp. And I'll be honest, my first amp was a PV, little practice amp. Then I graduated to somehow a GK amp, which was not. That was the wrong direction. Then I used the Marshall. It's like, wow, I suck. It's like, whoa, how do you do this?
There's something that happened. My first experience really with because JCM 800s and stuff. I mean, I saw those growing up. I grew up in the 80s, but my first experience with a Plexi, really a proper old Plexi, was not. It was a mile from here at Stag Street. Great old studio with an API, and it's still there.
Yeah, still there.
But the guy I was in a band with, Frank Symes, he had the 67 Super Lead that, and I had for the day. One of the early kind of 3-channel high gain monsters that was like, and that amp next to the 67 Plexi, I learned real quick, didn't sound like what that 60s, and I was like, oh my God, like the Plexi it was like riding this wild horse. That I had to,
that's a good analogy.
But then I learned that like with the right pedal, fuzz or something into it, or maybe just the amp just super loud or whatever, and then you work in the controls, magic happens with this is the thing, the amp and the cabinet and the guitar becoming an instrument, as opposed to this is the instrument, and then you've got your modeler or whatever you've got or something like that. If it's the speaker cabinet, everything's flowing through, then you play different and different stuff comes out. And I was like, oh, I get it. And it sounded so crazy, but when you distill it down through a microphone and microphone preamps, and then it gets mastered and mixed and everything like that, and then it comes out on this little thing we all listen on earbuds now or whatever. It's like, that's how, like Jimi Hendrix, I mean, thank God somebody didn't go, turn that down, it's too loud. Oh, like I'm not allowed to turn it up, It's like we wouldn't have had the music that
No,
we
it's
have.
like to me that we
way.
were discussing that earlier. It's a feel thing, and if it becomes a symbiotic positive feedback loop
Yeah.
with like the relationship with your new amp, but there has to be an amount of volume there. To me, you've got to feel it, like literally feel it. I'm not saying ears bleeding. I'm saying maybe pants shaking a little bit.
Totally.
Just so, because, and the thing is, if you're playing with a drummer and you hit that A chord on a Plexi, it's magic. You don't have to play an Ingve lick. You just go, I rule.
Yeah,
Unless you don't, And my other saying is, I had the honor of working for Marshall for years. My favorite saying was, if you suck and you buy a Marshall, you'll suck louder than you've ever sucked before in your life. So you probably shouldn't buy one because you might get fired from your band because they'll go, oh, geez, we can hear him now. He sucks.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, it's 100% accurate. But I always try and think of it like this. It's like you have this much. It's like when you see the actors, you meet them in real life. You're like, hey, nice to meet you. Because the reality is like when you're on screen, this is the real estate. So whether you're big, small, tall, it all gets kind of filtered down to this. So the crazy part, which brings the conversation earlier, is that right now, everything, like, for example, when I try stuff, honestly, I don't even try them in the room. I bring them in, I run it through my rig that I know. And so you're working, let's say I work in the Pro Tools format, but in essence, everything, if you put everything and you're not fooled about the volume in the room or the reverb in the room or whatever, how many times have you bought an amp in a store because it sounded massive and then you get home and you're like, this is a donkey, man, you know what I mean? And but when you literally just look at it, like, this is the space you have to occupy. And so some of the new higher gain amps may have more gain, more this, and it plays like one thing, but when you're literally looking at everything and you stack everything up at this kind of watermark level, that's when you really start hearing where things shine. And believe me, I use tons of high gain stuff. I love that stuff. It's amazing. But they're all different. And to his point, it becomes like, for me, a lot of my playing is it's almost like having some fight. Like if guitars are too easy to play, I can't play them. I don't know what to do. I'm not used to having that pushback. You know what I mean? It's like, some people like nines. I have nines on this one, but like I need tens. Otherwise, like there's not there. It becomes part of that whole, you play off of, like you ever have those nights when you're playing and the just sound isn't there and you're just like, you're pushing that ball uphill the whole gig and it's like, and the next night it'll be a totally different thing because you get the sound and you feed off it. So more so than even how they sound is how they feel. And I think a lot of people aren't used to that. The Plexi is like driving the big truck around the farm. I mean, it's squishy and washy and it's not a Formula One car by any stretch. At least not the ones not in the 30 I've played, which is interesting. Right. I've played Dumbles and it's not just how they sound, but they react totally different. And that's the part that I think gets lost in interpretation.
Yep.
Yeah. But you were a guy that when I first listened to you, I was always impressed with like the way you dialed this right away when we sat down here and you came in. It was like, that's you have a thing where you don't pile on the gain. You get a lot out of your hands and there's a lot of clarity in your playing, but there's also a lot of warmth in the way that you dial. And that's what I've always sort of associated with you. And
that's old amps because we never had, there was no, the problem I had is before I started touring and going, like I would go, when I went to the UK and I started getting hip to like color sound pedals, that's when I was like, wow, otherwise we didn't have that. So we just had amps, you would just take them and turn them up. And part of it is you kind of have to have no shame in your game. Like there's some nights where you're like, it's a hard day at work, So for me, I just kind of zeroed in on what was going to apply to me. But part of like what's fascinating is like watching you guys set up. It's like, whoa, like it makes total sense, and it's so polar opposite than the way I would approach it. Like treble knobs, I'm like, don't use those.
So how did? Because we didn't do yours.
Yeah, let's do yours.
Mine is just this, So I'm just gotta, the whole thing for me with the Plexis was getting that tight, then having enough gain to be able to. So for me, it was just trying to be able to facilitate, you could have a tight rhythm. and then having enough to be able to solo, which was always the challenge with those old amps, because
Yeah.
it was always just enough gain to do a hot rhythm, and then when someone was like, "Hey, play a lead," it would just be like, "Oh, here we go," and you would nosedive into the mountain. So for me, the way I set them up is kind of always the same. First of all, I run the presence open on mine. So where's the presence on? Because then we can go to the alternate. So so it's real simple for me. It's, as a matter of fact, it's as simple as you can make it. So all I do is turn the knobs so they work. That one works, okay. That one works, okay. Treble, we don't need that. And then
you're in alt mode right now.
I'm in
So
alt
you got
mode.
the presence going.
Okay, so I got amp and then treble. No, I don't use it because I don't like the skinny
So that's
stuff.
really low for treble.
Yeah. How do I get I want the alt, let me get the room off. The room is, there we go. So I'm saying you can dress them up, but you can't take them out. Sad. So for me, where the guitars live, I don't like the skiddly high-end stuff. I never use it.
But your tone has high end, but I think your hands are just, they're coming through.
You mentioned you run the presence high, right?
But presence is wide open because
Presence
it's tied
wide
to
open.
the
So you're
power
getting
section.
the
But the preamp gains, you took all the treble out before the. Oh,
I never use treble. I never used the treble.
wow,
You know,
that's
so-
killer. Yeah.
It's funny what you're saying about the presence and treble, because I saw Slash play a festival about 5 years ago, like pre-COVID. Looked at his amps with his tech. It's like, yeah, treble off, presence pretty much whacked.
But here's
But
the
it
thing.
sounded great.
I literally saw by the way, just side note, I saw the last Guns N' Roses tour. His sound was awesome. Like, I literally went home and Googled, which I rarely do. I went home and Googled what he uses. That's how good it sounded. He played great. They sounded great. Even Richard, the other guitar player, played. That was a
great.
pro show. But here's the crazy part. Like I said, will be 100% walking contradiction, because on another amp, I'll turn the like on a Fender, I'm cranking the treble.
Right.
So really, there's just it's just for Marshalls, I just go strictly by sound. I don't like the skiddly high end. And to be honest with you, once the drums kick in, all that goes away anyways. So I'm just trying to find that real estate where I can kind of shine. And I just want the rhythm to be heard. I don't like, if there's too much gain, like, So for me, so I just keep it. So I just do it all with the fingers.
But that feels like a lot of gain when you hear it. It's like, that's
there's
like
not.
the right amount of
There's
sizzle.
very little. I mean, it's enough to do all the. Was always a big thing too, especially back in the day. But
Right.
I have just enough gain to get the leads across, so you can get all the. But other than that, I kill it there. I never use more than that.
Yeah, and to me that's the funny thing. If you listen really closely to a lot of players you really like, they're not using as much gain as you perceive them to. Like that first Van Halen album, that's pretty darn clean. And AC/DC, especially Malcolm Young, that's just air distorting. His amp's clean.
Yeah, I mean, watching live AC/DC, I watched a bunch last week. I was just totally into it last week. Went down a rabbit hole of like 75, 76, 77 AC/DC. And it's like, man, it's all hands. And
It's
he's
all
like,
hands, and
There's
he's-
not a lot of gain.
He's attacking the guitar. And Angus is a bit dirtier, but remarkably clean, because he's got that roundness to his tone. And the more gain you have, you kind of smear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all the clarity.
You can kind of hear it when you're playing. There's kind of like you hit. It's
Yeah,
just
there's that point.
It's like this sounds good. You're in that sweet spot. Okay, and then after that, it doesn't really give you any more. If anything,
Yeah.
it just kind of shuts down. The problem is you've got to be willing to nosedive. You
Right.
know what I mean?
As far as the less gain goes.
The less game,
Yeah.
because there's just I've definitely had some unfriendly evenings. You just have to commit to it. If you don't drop your mic and.
Well, and that was the
drop the
thing
mic.
with you, is that your clarity when I heard your
he's-
the clarity when you would play and just all in, you're picking your technique. Like that's what popped out on your records to me from the beginning. I mean, you were young when you put out how old were you? when you did
I
the
was
last?
15, turned 16 when I did it.
Man.
And it was just like like every note popping out, you know.
Yeah,
And I
that
was
was
like,
just
wow,
no, but that's a well. Thank you. So one there, but two, I think it was just. And the crazy part is, that first record, believe it or not, is a Boogie Studio 22, because that's all I had. We had no money. You know what I mean? Yep, it was crazy. It was a
kind of
Boogie
like that.
Yeah,
I
it
was
was
like,
great. It was really cool. The problem, I had it, and It ran so hot, it literally caught on fire. Then we had it repaired. It never sounded the same. And
I had a Caliber 50, which was like the double power version.
did you have the EQ on it?
And I did have EQ
you're
on
fancy.
it. Yeah, but it was the same. We used to red play tubes all the time. I got rid of it, but what a sound!
What a sound,
it was
right?
a really, really, really similar amp.
Yeah, they were literally. I think yours was just like the adult version of mine.
Yeah, like a 40.
Yeah,
40
yeah,
watt.
yeah.
And yours was 20. But
Yeah,
they had a great lead.
Great sound, yeah, and that's. So that's what we, but it was also, and the sad part is I had Marshalls at the time. I just never used them because I could never figure out how to wrangle them. Like the problem is like I was telling you guys, I stayed in my parents' garage, which was like an 8x8, and I had a cabinet in there. So, when you're, 13 years old and you're, I kid you not, you want to hear a crazy story? I traded a Jackson Pro Soloist Custom for a 100-watt 1968 Plexi stack, dead original. I was technically the third owner. As a matter of fact, when I opened it up, every iodine thing was never been touched. And the crazy part is when I pulled the backs off the cabinet, because why wouldn't you open up a completely pristine thing? The speaker said 20 watts. And I was thinking, that sucks. I wanted 25. Right? And here's the best part. And underneath, on the bottom of the cabinet, there were these little gold foil things that were rolled up like this, like somebody rolled. They were real small. And when you opened them, they said 25. So what happened was they ran out of 25s and they stuck them in, and over time they just dried up and fell. So that's how clean. The only problem with that amp was the pilot light didn't go on, and I couldn't get it to work. It sucked for me because I didn't understand how the gains work. I didn't understand, and so it was, so obviously I wasn't meant to have that amp because my skill set did not deserve that. But the crazy part was, so I literally have had a completely pristine with the hats on top of the eel, the mullered eel thread. This thing was literally as fresh as they come. It had the big Revo casters and it had the covers, and it was I couldn't wrangle it. I could not wrangle it at that time, at that point, because they were just, like I would hear guys like you. I'm like, this guy's, how does he do this? Like it would literally baffle me. I'm like, I don't get it. There's got to be a trick, and I could never figure it out. So expect that when you go down the Plexi rabbit hole. So the crazy thing is now, the way that you have all this, the way you guys have this is insane. You get all the benefits minus the hearing loss.
Well, the question is,
a trip.
what I want to know now is, what did you trade that amp for? Where'd the amp go?
So here's I sold it to Brett Magnano at Guitar Oasis, and I sold the head for $1,500 because we were like when I'm talking broke, we're like, well, it's time to pay the rent. Okay, we got to dump it. And I sold the 2 cabinets for $1,500, and I remember walking out there laughing, going, that sucker. And I sold the head for $1,500, and I'll never forget. And I just remember thinking, no one will ever pay that kind of money. I can't believe that guy bought off me. And I was feeling pretty good about my financial prowess at that time.
Yeah.
And
it's like the 54 Les Paul that I bought for $2,000 and sold a few years later for $2,600, and I thought, man, I did really
crushed
good.
it, right?
Crushed it,
Yeah, crushed it.
Financial genius. Yeah.
Elon
I
Musk
still
too,
cry
right here.
at least once a week. I cry.
brutal.
About that.
And this-
it was Marshall's back then was like, I remember in the 90s. I remember Black Market Music.
God, yeah.
Black Market Music in LA.
Yeah, Chris.
Go in there, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
But like a lot, and I didn't know anything about Marshalls back then. It's like you said to your point earlier. A lot of they could be, all they got to do is be worked on to sound good. But I literally went in there one time looking for, I'm going to get my first Plexi. Like it's time, sometime in the 90s. I probably heard that 67 and was like, okay, I got to get one of these. And I played like 10, 11, 12 amps that day in there. And they all were like, there was problems on it. Like they probably just needed new caps
or biasing or something.
Issues. Yeah. But now we know that it's like, it's just a matter of getting the right work done on them and stuff. But now they're unattainable. Like back then, I probably could have picked one up for $1,000 or $900 or whatever they were going for.
Now
late
they're like
90s.
what, between 6 and 9, 6
Oh,
and 10?
that's cheap,
Dude.
now.
Yeah,
A lot more than that. Yeah.
My 71 I bought a few years ago for $1,850. Like when I say a few years ago, I probably had it 10 years now.
Right.
That's the pandemic times.
Right.
Just with the lost years.
Another side note, which I think people should always bring up, because I wish people would talk about this stuff. They never do. But the reality is, so first of all, Marshalls in general were what I called like weekend. Like they would just go down, grab parts. And so there was not a ton, like I'm pretty sure that's the way they did it. They would just grab parts, make their amps, run out of them, grab another. They weren't like these coveted things. They were just...
In the early days, it was catch as catch can.
Yeah, right, exactly. I heard they would go down on the weekends, grab what they needed,
In the very early days, like once they became a real factory, but like the ones that are worth the most money.
Yeah.
And they would change, like Jim would listen to, we were talking about this a few months back.
Yeah.
Jim would listen to people like Pete Townsend. They'd come and say, hey, I want this, I want that. So if Jimi Hendrix wanted more treble, they'd tweak the amps accordingly. So the whole Plexi era 65 through 69, there were numerous different
Many
renditions of
variations,
them.
yeah.
And then if you add into the fact that there was a huge component tolerance issue back then, could be plus or minus 15 to 20%.
Crazy, right?
And then component drift over the time, you could get 3 amps that were made with the same circuit, with the same exact, components, but they were all different because this cap was plus 20, this resistor was minus 5, this was plus 3.
Yep.
So it's almost like wooden guitars.
That's a massive point, and it's like that even with the fuzz pedals because so let's say you have a part. Let's take simple math. Let's say you've got 10 parts, and each part is minus 20. 20%. Think what that is now. Everything's made within 0.01 specs. So the problem is like for example, my thing from coming from the older stuff to new stuff is there are so many people that make such great product. I mean that sincerely. There's great stuff out there.
Never been a better time.
I mean, it really is. But the interesting thing is all of it kind of feels to me a little bit hi-fi, like it's so consistent and good. It's almost like the one thing I miss about the old stuff was the fact they were a little greasier, a little grimier. There was that extra, and it's not much, it's maybe 10, 15%, but there's something about it. It does add up. And the interesting thing, which is exactly on your point, is that when I was getting Marshalls, so I'm, when I was, like I said, when I was 16 or 17, that was the 80s. So by then they were already 20, and they had been worked on. So the problem you're getting is it's becoming a game of telephone. What started off as one story is now morphed and morphed and morphed. So the problem is the bulk of the stuff you're playing, all the vintage stuff, it's all over the map. Finding one that's in a sweet zone is even harder now. And I really noticed it until once the internet came out and then everything became about money. Then I started finding clean stuff again. Right. Like I remember even before you'd find guitars in the 70s, they were throwing DeMarzos, no one cared, whatever it was. And then the second Strats were worth 20 grand, all of a sudden they were clean and pristine again. So it's interesting because there's anybody that's jumping on that train now, you're jumping on something that's already been kind of morphed out to a certain extent. And I think
the train's been derailed several times.
7 times. And honestly, for me, it takes a little bit of the charm out of it because if you're used to Generation 1, and everybody's tripping out about Generation 5, I'm like, I kind of saw that movie. But so you have an incredibly valid point, especially with fuzz pedals. You take a fuzz face, it's really only 2 transistors. Yeah. One is driving into the other. And even though let's say they multiply 100 times a piece, well, this one says 100, but it's 40, and this one says 100, but it's 200. Yeah. So that particular one is 40 going to 200, whereas your buddies could be 110 going into 4. So that's a lot of things. So the fact that you can now harness this stuff is pretty great because you get all the upsides minus the downsides. So
well, and you being, that brings us maybe around to this, like the point being that you've gone through, obviously. I mean, I know the amount of time,
a lot of time
you put into this and had a lot of thought into it, and so to have put what you consider to be the best iterations or whatever of incarnations of these particular amplifiers into the box, you save people a lot of time. Once again, it's the golden age. Yeah, pick up one of these and listen to all the work that James done for the last 3 years.
But I'll be honest with you, there's still my gut feeling like I have to balance what I know I like about Marshalls with what you might want out of a Marshall, what you might want, and what you might want.
Sure.
Well, I just want it to be really loud, so I'm easy.
So I always have to ride the line of just not making it for me. I have to put myself in a position like, okay, if I'm this player, what do they need out of it? So I always try to not be so self-centered to make it about me because I have a closet full of that
Always you learn how to mod them. James, always about you. Hey, I've got a question. I would like to see how you set yours because I thought yours sounded super like to me. I heard that and I was you have like
it was very different.
Dude, what's the story? Like yours was thick. I like that.
I just what I did with the preset was I just edited it out. So I went straight to brown, straight to the mix cab.
Oh, the JBL mix,
Yeah, the JBL. Presence about 7, treble about 7, middle in the middle.
Where's the presence though?
About 2 o'clock.
Damn it.
See? All right.
About 2, and then I used the boost, and I did have room in there as well, so. But it's still got that
early MTV that's crazy because I think that's, to me, honestly, I think so many people think of that as the Plexi sound, not just the end thing, which is interesting.
That's more 800 to me.
Yeah, but it's funny because that's what I think it sounds like too, but I think that's what people perceive it to be. And I don't think it necessarily is. I think it's more the thinner kind of, whereas this is like that thicker, almost like, to me, it's early MTV, like what I'm hearing.
Well, and the great thing about this is like, what people don't realize is, well, I know you guys do, but a Plexi is all about those power tubes being cooked, being fried. It really is. The brown sound is the big tubes, not the small tubes. Like in a master volume, you're baking the front. Like you're getting all the dirt out of the front end. And
there's a concept in what you're saying. Yes, you just nailed something that we should talk about too, because really we're talking about 2 layers of gain, because you're hitting the power tubes, but with an amp on 7, you're also getting a little gain out of the preamp. Yeah. So now you've got this layered gain stage where it's not just this one-dimensional thing.
So my question is this.
You brought up a really important topic there.
So I set mine. So basically, I'm just setting mine. I'm 25 watts. So so I wanted that squawk. So my question is this, and I'm just opening up. So I have it set on lead. So if I go to brown, which I just go down, right?
Yep, just go down.
And so now it should be a little squishier.
Is the main difference the variac with the brown?
And the hot bias and the variac down.
It's easier to play.
Yeah, it's all, the squishiness is all there. Yeah.
I did a video on this very subject.
That's right. You did a great video on this.
Like talking
everyone should go
about
watch that, by the way. You should watch this video.
The sound of the transformer in the so when you got your amp in a studio, the cab's isolated in the other room, and how it goes. Like, you can hear
talk about that.
The sizzle.
It's the sag.
The sag, and you
but
can
that's
hear.
What you get. But that's that sound.
It's to me. It'll tighten up on
that. When Eddie played Main Street, it hit the. Do the right tuning. That thing. When he hit that chord at the beginning, and the amp goes, it kind of does it. That's pretty good.
It's in there.
It's got like a vowel to it. That's so.
It's like a crash.
There's a kind of,
and you can actually hear the transforming the amp do that. So it's like, and if you don't have, like if you put it's kind of amazing if you have a Plexi with a master in it that's a pre-EQ master, like a JCM 800 cell master, and you bring that down, you're like, oh God, it's very clean, like not very powerful. It's a little anemic. It's a great sound, but it'll get up to about AC/DC level and not beyond if you're running that master down around, anywhere 4 or 5, 6. When you bring that up and you hear so the amp that it doesn't have a master the way it comes.
Right.
It's the combination of the phase inverter, which is part of the power amp, right?
Yep.
And then also the power tubes finally right at the end of when you're getting it up to 7, 8, 9, 10, the whole thing just starting to sag beyond its ability to deliver anything.
You guys are you guys are so much farther ahead. Like, I kid you not, like this is how sketchy it is. And I'm going to tell you the story because I want everybody out there to realize, like, you're not alone. I am that idiot. So basically I had, I would buy a Plexi. So the first thing, Plexi, whatever, and I plugged in, it had no gain. I mean, it was like it was the most unfriendly thing to play ever. And so what happened was I kept blowing them up. So my dad was like, listen, I'm going to teach myself how to work on these things because we only had one amp. So we had one amp, one guitar, that's what we'd use, and I'd blow it up and I'd have no amp. So he would figure it out. So what I ended up doing at one point, because I couldn't figure out, there was this Aspen Pittman tubes that had a master volume in it. I plugged it in and it did not sound pleasant to my ear. It was very glassy. But it was all you could get. It was like it made me wish I had a JCM 800 type thing. So, but all I could afford were these goofy Plexi Marshalls that nobody wanted at the time. So what we ended up doing was, I would use 2 of them. I would use one as a preamp and one as a power section because this is another thing about the variac. Everybody thinks it changes the tone. I don't think it changes the tone at all. I think it changes the playability. I think it changes the compression, the distortion, the overtones. But the sound doesn't change in the least to my ears. Like if you plug a deluxe into like a variac, you turn it down, they're anemic. Like I didn't get what everybody was talking about. I couldn't figure it out. Originally, keep in mind when the Van Halen thing came out, he told everybody he variaced them up too, which everybody's pleasantly forgot as I cooked out a whole set of power tubes. Thanks, dude. And so anyways.
You did that. You were one of those guys. 140 volts.
Right.
Oh shit.
Oh, for sure. And it would be red. I'm like, this sounds better. It didn't sound any better. It just sounded almost, if anything, it made it sound gave it more headroom. It was like the exact opposite. And I couldn't figure it out. out, but in my mind, I'm like, this sounds better. My dad's like, it doesn't. I'm like, it does. And then the amp would blow up, you know? And so...
they always sound great right before they blow up.
Oh, yeah, man, you know? But for me, they would blow up, and I was out for the next 6 weeks. I have to go do the paper route to get the tubes. But what I would do is, there was a way you could break them. So what I would do is, I would keep the preamp steady, and the only thing I would variac was the power section. And to me, and I didn't know about this, the rebiasing would makes a huge difference, because that only came out later. Keep in mind, you know, our version of, we'd open up the record and we'd look and be like, this is amazing. You know, we didn't know any of this stuff. And I was in Connecticut, which was 3,000 miles away from Los Angeles. So you guys were more plugged in. So what I would do is I would just variac the power section only. And that's when it sounded better, because that would get kind of more skittly and more like, that's where you get that like break up, whereas the preamp sounded terrible when you did that. So, and I didn't know that. So anybody that's going to try and do it at variac at home to your Fender amp, it's going to suck. So just know that. It's not pleasant, you know? And so I didn't realize, but the power section is always the sound for me. It's always been, you get that power section heated up, and then you just use whatever you need to control it. I always thought that was the best sound for me, at least, you know? But I don't know. But this thing is crazy, because now you have this, you know, you have that real tight percussive thing. That's great. Which is pretty cool. Yeah, hey, my pedal's broken. It sounds better. Yeah.
That's interesting. So the difference in volume when you flip this is
really,
about, that's about what they did.
It's in there. I left it alone.
You left it alone. Yeah.
I didn't want to change. I didn't want to auto scale. I want you to feel like the amp's doing the right thing.
Yeah. That's really cool, man. It's got a really, really accurate simulation of that sound, I think.
And I was telling Nick this a little earlier, is honestly a lot of the work was just working with the hardware and rebiasing and moving the variac on the real thing constantly. And then going, no, yes, rebias, pull it down. Like, okay, that's a cool sound. And then doing the same thing here, because I'd get the revisions I'd rebias the actual pedal.
Okay.
And it came in that way, like, okay, how about a 45? You know, you rebias it this, and then 70% to dissipate. We were literally doing that for weeks.
And just to get super nerdy, like, did you do 68.7s?
I have a pile back there, 68.7s. And I got 2 from Blues as well a couple of years ago. This is how long I've been poking at this.
Yeah, he's been hot for a hot minute. It's funny, I can't, the 6.7s, they're much glassier. They sound more like, they're more scoop sounding.
They've got more, a little bit of 6L6
yeah,
in
definitely,
them.
which is weird. I thought they would not be that, and they are,
No,
which
they
is
are.
interesting.
But we listened to a bunch. We had like Wing C's and then Mullards, 6.8. So I just kind of went through. And
which ones did you like the best?
I just like Mullards. If I can just get a good
set
of Mullards, that's kind of the magic for me.
Right. I like the old German RFT Siemens, those ones. They're really cool to me, the skinny bottle ones that, they sound like Boston or something.
Yeah.
But I really like them. I like
But now we're chasing vintage tubes to go into a Marshall, and then it's like, well, if I'm just going to play it on 10 for some other stuff, I'll pull those out and put some regular stuff in there for a while.
Right. Yeah.
And I got to say, the other thing that impressed me about this is the fact you got the Transformer Ghost thing in there.
So the Ghost thing is there.
If I go to the neck pickup. A little double.
Yes.
A little hum in there that happens.
And you can turn it off, though.
Oh, you can?
So we did fight about this.
Oh, okay.
Because in some of the amps I had, there was 2 scenarios where you get the ring modular kind of intermodulation stuff around the note, which is that stuff around the note, and then this kind of thing that comes in, which is a 120 hertz derivative of the 60 cycle AC coming in through. And some of the amps had more, some had less, because I changed the caps. Last year on this one, hadn't changed the caps in 20 years on this one.
And probably some had different filtering.
Different filtering, and the funny thing is, I started playing with that too. It's like, well, let's just change the filter caps. We changed the filter caps in this thing. So it's like, we cleaned it up. I'm like, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I like it out of spec.
I like that gooey stuff.
The gooey stuff, and we left it in, but then decided to, on a switch, like, okay, you could just turn it off. If you're a modern person, you don't want all that junk on your note, but you want it to sound the same and the feel there, you could turn it off. Or you could just let it be what it is and let the thing
You know,
all
the
that
only
crap
time
around
you
it.
hear it is when you play single notes. Like if you play
yeah.
2 notes at a time, you
Here, I'll
can't
do
hear it
it.
anymore.
Yeah, right,
'cause it's so cool.
Make it a thing. You know?
And I hear it up here.
Yeah, right.
Like, that's
Right,
cool.
Yeah,
You know?
that
Yeah.
up here, like on the Strat, when I do, I'll just put it on 10. Hear it? Boom, boom,
Yeah,
boom.
that's ghosting.
And that's
It's
not,
like-
dig- that's not,
But when you now play 2 notes.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't really perceive it once there's 2 notes to
No.
me. You know?
And you put reverb and delay on things, and then you hear.
But I was gonna say if you don't have it, it sounds like when you do
It might
play
be-
2 notes or a chord, it just does all this magic stuff that makes it sound fatter. And when it's gone, it's like,
You know,
it's
it's
a
almost
little-
like when you remove the hiss from the old records. Like you
Right,
don't
right.
realize
Yeah.
how much of that,
Right.
how much of whatever that.
Great example.
Yeah, it's like, you know, everything is so clean now. You're like, yeah, you know, there's just something about it. I don't know if it's a masking quality. You will need somebody smarter than I to figure it out. But it's amazing. Like even I was at Dweezil's, we were listening to his dad's record, and we were listening to the individual tracks. Like there's just like this and stuff popping, and when you put it all together, you're like, oh, it's amazing.
I have a
And
whole theory about that, and it's because I think that people are kind of inherently effed up, you know what I mean? And like everybody's got their stuff going on, and when things are too perfect, it doesn't resonate with us.
Yeah.
Because we're not perfect. We're far from perfect.
No.
And we like things that are a little bit rough around the
and our
edges.
favorite records are not perfect.
They're far from it, actually.
from it.
When you listen to it, like honestly, here's the crazy part. Listen to how out of tune things are.
Yeah.
It's weird.
But
Like,
it's brilliantly out of tune. And
Perfectly,
the cool
yeah.
thing about that, the ghosting is, it's musical weirdness in the same way the noise you were talking about. It's not like digital aliasing, which is just
Right, no,
like
exactly.
ice pick in the head. There's something gloriously musical about that.
And
even
it's
though
in the
dissonant.
middle,
Like a
too.
record scratch. Oh, it's cool.
There's
See,
something.
I love that.
Every one of these amps in here does that.
Totally.
You cannot get around it.
Yeah, I mean, and AC30s do it. Like any
ACs are that's
They're
the
the
big
king
one.
of
yeah.
it. Yeah, go.
Hammonds do it. You ever play Hammond organs? They
Oh,
they
I play
oscillate.
terribly, but
Yeah, right. They oscillate all over the map. You know, but,
But
that's
again,
what.
you can get the app and you can go turn it off
Yeah.
if you would like to.
It's via the app. Okay, I see.
But
Yeah.
then you'll be depressed because it's not because it's too perfect.
Or you'll be
gotta be
super
too
happy because
nice.
it's perfect
this
now.
is too
Yeah.
wrong. This is wrong.
Yeah,
You know,
don't
but-
be perfect. Be kind of be a little like embrace the nasty.
Like honestly,
That's
like
it.
we were talking about this earlier. I'm gonna go one further, which is terrible to say, but like everybody is so good now. Like honestly, like you just pull out Instagram, you're just like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna go the other way. Like I like, you know, like seriously, I like the guys that are like all my records. They're rough and tumble. They're not really in tune. They're not perfectly like. That's what I like. So I'm confused why I've spent my whole life trying to be this thing that I'm
Perfect
like. I don't
thing.
even like that thing. You know
Dude.
what I mean? Like,
that whole
The 2 notes, yes.
thing, right? I mean, it's like
it's amazing.
It was
you know what I mean?
amazing.
But it's just like, yeah, I'm all about kind of being a little ham-fisted on the guitar. Like I think that's kind of, and it's interesting because
The problem is that's never you're too
fucking
too far down the road of
you'd be
amazing.
amazed. You guys see,
You're
there's-
ham-fisting it, dude.
I know where the dead bodies are buried. Trust me. You know, it's like
You know what's funny is that I literally just interviewed Nuno Betancourt, and we were talking about the Rise solo, and he was saying that's far from perfect, but that's why it's great.
Yeah.
It's a guy playing with a band. He said, I'm hitting notes. If you isolate it, it's in places,
Yeah,
but
but
it's perfect.
he's
'cause
committed. I gotta
It's
say-
organic. He
Yeah.
means it. It's from
yeah,
here.
exactly. That's the thing.
And it moves you. It's an emotional thing, and I think the perfection removes some emotion in a
Yeah.
weird way.
Yeah. Props to him. I think he's a great balance of that.
Yeah,
Like,
he
he's
is.
clearly, you know, his technique is bananas, but I think he really, when I hear it, it's just, you know, it's
It's
just,
emotion.
yeah, he
And
definitely, you know.
And he talked about, hey, everyone's freaking about AI. He said, bring it on, because what I do is
Yeah.
an AI can't do it. They can't mess up like I can. And there's a glorious honesty
I think
about that.
the key is to work with it. It's like,
Yeah.
like, listen, nobody's ever like, dude, can I have the iPhone 2, please? Like that doesn't happen. The technology only moves forward. So I think if anything, the key is just to you know, to work with it. And like I said, I think where it's going to kill, I think where it's going to take out a lot is it's going to flood like anything else. You're going to get a lot of the bottom end stuff that's going to just fill. But to balance with that stuff kind of sucks anyway. So who cares? You know what I
yeah.
mean? But the real real stuff, you know, like I'm listening to all these like Australian punk bands, like, you know, Amyl and the Sniffers and stuff like that. Like, that's where it's at, dude. Like, you know, that's why my ears ring these days, because like, you know, they just show up and they're giving everything they got. If they were to tune up, it would bum me out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that to me, as someone that just, and that's got to be universal, whether you're this age or that age, whether you like this or that or anything. Whereas I think a lot of times I listen to a lot of the pop stuff or the hip hop stuff, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm asleep before the track comes over. There's just, you know, it just feels like I'm watching a machine do stamping. You know?
I mean, I've just been doing some production work, and I had a guitar player come in the other day and say, "How was that take?" I said, "Why are you asking me? How did it feel to you?" He said, "I'm not sure. Can I see it?" I'm like, "What do you mean, see it?" And he wanted to look at his take.
I mean,
You
dude,
don't look
I remember.
at music. I'm sorry. You
I
listen.
remember the first time I saw Beat Detective, you know, being used, and you know, there's always. I mean, it's funny. We were making a record. I remember recording. We were doing it here. It was at Sound City, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Damn, I just remembered. And we're in the other room recording on the old machine through the great old console, and using the same drums that Nirvana used on Nevermind, because that's what everybody was doing back then, renting the kit from Drum Doctor, trying to get. But so here we are doing that, going to all those lengths, right? And then it's going over to Pro Tools to for us to continue working on the album. And I remember there being the guy sitting there with and doing this. What's this Beat Detective thing that you're going to do now? You know, because that's what everybody was doing at the time.
Yeah.
It's the early 2000s, you know. And he goes, "Oh, it barely does anything, man. I mean, your drummer's great. It's barely going to do anything. Watch this." And we watched the transients and it just went, you know, all the little you could just see them move on the screen. And the singer was wise enough. His first reaction was to go, "That's the feel. You just took the feel out. That was what you just did."
Yeah, no, it is. It's feel.
You just erased the feel. And it was like, oh man.
But once again, you got to work with. I mean, I've worked on a couple projects where I'm like, "Woo, somebody call the Beat Detective." I mean, you know, there's there's those too. Let's be, you know, I mean, so
you got to rescue things sometimes, but
you know, so you know, you got, you know,
the problem is when it's not necessary. Like this, the ghost thing. It's like you don't need to take that out.
Unless somebody's like, "Dude, can you get rid of that?" And okay, maybe I'll take it out.
Right. Yeah. Which I
don't know. I like it, but you know,
I do too.
Once again, it's I'm going to go back to they're just spoons and forks. You know what I mean? I think what's nice is that to have the option, and knives. I think to have that, but you kind of have to be the way things are, like especially because I mean, think about now. I'm doing all this like TV and film stuff, and it's just a trip because you're just working under a different guys altogether. So you become no one's sitting there. Did you use a 54 strap? I'm like, dude, what? You know what I mean? You're just on a whole nother thing. So I think the ability to have that is never going to be a bad thing, but it's just, you know, I think the default, you know, to me, if I can, I always like stuff if I can just turn it up, get a sound and go, you know what I mean? So that's kind of, so.
Well, here's a weird topic here is, honestly, there's things that, you know, I've worked at the other companies, I've modeled this gear before, and they're all great in their own way. I mean, how many records were made with a pod?
Right.
That were still great songs and sold well, and you'll listen and go, "That's awesome." So there's a certain amount of songwriting and playing and arrangement that makes it something complete. But even the challenge that we just walked in here fresh, because really I just threw some pedals on the table and just put up stuff because you know Marshalls. So that right there, the fact that we were able to just at least walk up to this and get the right stuff that you would have done on the real amp is enough for me to feel like, okay, I guess we're okay.
Dude, you know what I respect about what you're doing to that point is that what you're doing is you're making these, and you've done it with the whole series, is that, yes, it actually is possible to make them not sound good if you set just like the original amp.
Yep.
And I know that has to be, like you say, the ghosting, you're fighting for that. I know you are, because it's like, and that's a really, really cool thing because it's giving people the experience that they should have when they go to, it shouldn't just say Plexi and that was, you know, the amp that I was talking about in the 90s that I had, you know, was supposed to sound like a Plexi on that. And I learned that it didn't sound anything. It sounded like, somebody said it sounds like a Plexi that's been perfectly recorded coming through studio monitors when it was coming out of the guitar cabinet. Right. You know, you were getting this already sanitized version, right? Yeah. And I know that you fight hard to give people as real experience as possible in a product like in a format like this, you know, to what the original thing did, right?
And the problem with what you just said is you can't get those sounds unless you give someone enough rope to hang themselves, because
Right.
sometimes it's the stuff it does in the settings that are bad that makes the good stuff work.
Dude, that's a magic thing you just said.
Yeah.
You can't get those sounds without giving somebody enough rope to hang themselves.
Yeah, you have to have it.
Yeah.
Because now you're just washing away all the stuff and you're left with nothing. Unless this thing can sound terrible and almost feed back and get nasty and too bright, those other settings do not translate.
Right.
You can't do it. You know, I love a good Strat, but this thing can sound terrible with some amps.
Sure.
But the thing is, when it's in its right, when we were talking about that bright cap, well, you liked it being super bright because you would just use a tiny bit of it.
Totally unusable below,
Right.
a certain point. And that's why I say it's a one-trick pony, but what a trick. But that's why you could put we learned these things after the fact. You can just put a little toggle switch on the thing and make the amp like 3. It's kind of amazing when some people are like, I had a Marshall once, I hated it, and it could be the bright cap thing.
I'm pretty sure I sold the bulk of my stuff because of the bright cap.
Because of this little
A
smart
20-cent
thing.
bright cap that was hanging off.
I just didn't know.
Clip it,
I didn't
and it'd
know.
be like, oh my God, it sounds like,
I didn't. That's sad.
In fact,
I didn't know
it,
either years ago.
It happened in this room because I think I was telling Nick too that JTM 50 back there didn't have a bright cap in it. So that was like my ballpark favorite amp for years.
Yeah.
Because I could put the volume anywhere and it just sounded great.
Yeah, right. It'll work. Yeah, especially with the Strat. Anywhere.
With a Strat, it was perfect.
Yeah.
And then we had a guy, Ross Knuckle, who did the Dream with me. We had the 68 stock, and I just got so mad. I'm like, this is so terrible. That bright cap's got to go. I opened the amp, took clips, and went, clunk. And he said to me, it's not stock anymore. I'm like, I don't care.
Right.
Because I did it to all the other amps I own in here.
Yeah.
And then we had a fight about it. Because it was like, well, is it better stock or is it better with the tweaks that you would do to make it your own?
Right.
And that's when you landed with, well, okay, you can just decide whether the ghost notes are there and the cap's there. Because they're hot top. But what I didn't want to do is, again, clean it all up so much that it's not that thing anymore.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're not giving people you really are great at hitting on that formula. I felt the same way about the Ruby with the Brian May thing. It was like I plugged that thing in and turned it up and I was like, oh man, it's like right there with that tone. But that thing can sound gnarly if you run that, just like an AC30. It's got a sweet spot.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel like that, because my gut's saying, oh, this is going to sound so terrible for a group of people who are going to hate me. Because that's the internal dialogue, like, oh, this is going to be really bad.
Yeah, but
you never know.
It's funny. I tell everybody this. It's just like a standard thing. I want something that's either amazing or awful. It's the stuff in the middle I don't really know what to do with, because I'm always, do you know what I mean? Well, just because, for me, because I'm doing all that TV stuff, I'm trying to get a big sonic footprint. I'm trying to create something, whatever that is. So you have to, in order, if you want to swing, I'm always swinging for the fences, and sometimes it's just a hot mess and the ball goes sideways and it doesn't work. But the point is big. That's kind of like why, like I would work with my dad, because he wasn't wasn't on a paper type guy. He would just be like we would turn the tubes up and they would literally, we'd watch him and they'd go pop. We're like, okay, that's too much. Let's pull it back. But we didn't know. But you need that element. Like I said, if it's either awful, I can work with that. If something's horrible sounding, I can make a thing out of that. You know what I mean? Give me a tuba that's broken. Okay, cool. Now we got a line. You know what I mean?
But that kind of experimentation you were doing with your pop, that was like the Eddie Van Halen method. He had no idea.
But the crazy part, which is interesting, which is kind of, it's a whole nother even episode, but it's like the way things are today, you don't get those type of happy accidents because everything is so controlled now.
Right.
It's like, when I grew up, we didn't have seatbelts. We had the car with the bucket seats and the parachute pants, and they take a left and we'd slide to the left and we'd slide to the right. It's like, if you want to understand my upbringing, there's that documentary. You ever seen that Class Action Park?
Oh, yes.
About that? Now,
it's great.
let me caveat, there's bad things happened there. So, obviously, that part was horrible. Let's not. But if you can watch the first hour, it's like if you gave my dad a water park, basically. So that was my upbringing. And you apply that. And so part of the spirit of, I think, what we like, why we're so into this stuff is like, let's go back to Ed, because he's obviously the watermark tone chaser. He was just, plugging electricity, doing something. You could never even do that by today's standards. That wouldn't apply today. So I miss that, I think, and it's just, everything has to evolve. Well, every generation wants their own, you know what I mean? But I miss that. I miss the wildness of it.
Dude, it was it was Rory and, the original treble booster, and Brian May building his own friggin' guitar with his dad. And
Roy Gallagher sticking different pickups in it.
And Richie, with the tape deck.
The tape deck, and even guys guys even later who had gear. I look at someone
Sorry,
like
Roy
King
Buchanan,
Zex,
I meant.
who took like a lap
Roy
ball,
Buchanan, with the telly with the pickups.
Totally pick up. But
Yeah,
like, here's another person that had a great tone, and then I saw the gears like that's a MIDI verb and a lab series amp with a Strat Elite, and I heard these King Zex records thinking, that's a creative tone,
Yeah.
and it wasn't some Bradshaw wreck. It was a bunch of junk ass gear.
Yeah,
that he just worked for him.
He just
Actually played his ass off. That's
played his ass off.
played his ass off. He did.
Yeah.
I've got to throw Tony Iommi in the mix as well, because the guy chops 2 of his fingers off,
God, yes.
makes tips out of a washing liquid up bottle,
right.
and then goes
creates
to use,
history.
and then has to use banjo strings,
Right.
so light strings, so tuning down to C sharp because he couldn't
made it
feel
work.
the string,
How
and
about,
he made it work.
how about I'm going to throw a plug in for the home team? How about Frank Zappa?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean,
yeah.
Literally, I remember going over there and I would look at the guitars, and it was almost like no thought for, hey, this is a vintage guitar, it's worth nothing. He's like, dude, get me that butter knife. We're slamming this in there. As a matter of fact, take that pedal and let's just duct tape it here. Okay, let's dig a hole, And so it was once again, as we discussed earlier, it's the ends to the means. It's not chasing. I don't even know if this thing was running, we were talking about that. But remember how we were saying, or at least I was saying, that everybody is chasing this sound, and I think that's the wrong approach. I think you got to go the other way. I think, you love the end result, and I appreciate that, but they were going through their process, and they got, if I give you a big truck and you got to take a left, you have to turn to table 3, whereas I think if you're in a sports car, it's a different experience. And I think, like I was saying, try and playing Superstition on anything other than a clavinet. It's a tough day, you know what I mean? So, whereas if you had a mini Moog, it's a different experience. And I think all these people were just taking what they had available. I don't think Hendrix was sitting there. I think, Hendrix had the fuzz face and he used the Marshalls, and they were kind of like big power amps, and that just became his thing. I really don't think he was sitting there trying to, you know what I mean? And I think so.
Well, once again, he was making the music that he made to a large degree, I think, because of here's these things, and that's cool.
This goes this way, and that
goes
goes this way, and this goes this way, and here's our adventure. And I think
here's the music that comes out.
Right,
yeah.
and the funny part is, I think is impressive as the technique is today and the knowledge. I mean, it's amazing what people have in their vocabularies these days. And slow golf clap to each and every one of you. The problem is that I'm missing this thing that moved my meter originally. That was cool. That was awesome. It wasn't a refined professional version of something somebody else did.
Yeah,
and I miss
it's
that.
like there's not. It's like I hear some of that. Sometimes in bands these days and stuff. And there's some people that Muse for me maybe the first time he was doing some really interesting things, and
cool.
the pad on the guitar and everything, and some really creative stuff. But it was every guitar player back in the day. It was like they all had these unique tones and unique rigs.
Well, I think you got Iommi, you had Brian May, you had Richie Blackmore,
Gilmore,
Gilmore, all these people, and I realize we're starting to sound like our parents, like back in the day.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
my lord,
right, man, So, and I get that, but and I appreciate it. But my point is, and I realize music has also moved. Music is now a different thing. Now music is an 808, a sub bass line, and somebody doing a cadence rap over the top, and maybe if you're lucky, you get some form of a melodic chorus. Maybe not, And
I think, sorry, didn't mean to step on you. I think the other thing about all the guys you've mentioned, they were pioneers.
Yeah.
There was no roadmap.
Yeah.
They created a roadmap. There was just a forest, and they carved their own.
But even a guy like Malmsteen, so personally, I'm big team Malmsteen because I felt for that neoclassical thing. Man, that dude was just straight gasoline.
And he still is. I saw him last week.
I mean, his vibrato, his everything. I mean, he really. I mean,
He plays with fire, man. He unleashes the fury.
Right.
Yeah, he's a one of a kind.
Right, he really is. And there's certain players that there's a lot of players and I'm going to throw a shout out to Steve Stevens because I think he gets some of the best Plexi tones going. I'm going to stand behind that. That guy is a phenomenal player, especially Plexi. I remember seeing him playing 2 Park 100 watts. Whew, man, I mean, I lost weight at that show. It was loud. I'm not going to lie.
He's
but
a
man,
monster. He's got such a unique, he appreciates Eddie Van Halen and Jimmy Page, and just as much he appreciates great flamenco guitar and King Crimson.
Yeah.
He's a total prog nut.
Yeah, but he rocks, dude.
Really,
I mean, he's...
Oh, totally. But he's got this unique bent to
Yeah.
his thing that makes him very he played he's kind enough to play bass on both my solo records, and he also came in and did some programming and stuff.
Yeah.
And when he lets loose on a tune, it starts sounding like Steve Stevens.
Right,
which
it gets
is so
going.
cool. Hey man, I came up with this thing. You want to check it out? I'm like listening to him. Like, do whatever you want to my song.
It's gonna hang in the couch there. You do your thing.
So cool. But I just remembered I got to give props to because somebody that I think is totally carrying the flame for what we're talking about here is Yvette Young.
Oh, Yvette's great.
Because man, I mean, here's somebody that taught herself. So she grew up, first I'll preface this, does this remind you of anybody? Grew up playing really strict classical piano, right? As well as violin. And, parents like strict upbringing, learning how to play like that. Didn't really enjoy that as a kid, I don't think, because like music to her was like work and it was so strict. But she got really, really, really good. Then she went through an illness in her, I think, early teens, like 12, 13, something like that. Ended up in the hospital. Somebody brought her a guitar, and she taught herself how to play guitar while she was recovering. But she's like, I'm going to do this for me. So no lessons from anybody. No. So imagine having this like really strict classical piano and violin upbringing, and then getting a guitar and going, I'm gonna do this for me. I wonder how I can do this, and then applying a little bit of this to it. And who am I reminding you of?
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Right. And her take on tone and pedals and the way that she plays and everything is very. And I said, you remind me of like there's a like in she hadn't really listened to Van Halen, I think, but there's an element there that's just a creativity, the way she approaches pickups and the way she approaches pedals and everything is like so inspiring to me. And
dude,
tunings,
100%.
I mean, the tunings are crazy. They're all over the map.
Yeah, that's the part I watch it. I got to be honest with you. There's some of the they're so good that it's like your ego doesn't even get hurt. They're that good. You're just like
it's like another thing.
I'm just I'm just like, you know what? Let me get my popcorn out. We're gonna check this out. And that's kind of I think that's just the true music. The kid me that just appreciates. I love seeing stuff like that.
That I don't understand.
Right?
I love seeing something where I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
I don't want to know. It
makes me feel like a kid.
And I'll double down on that. We hung out here a month ago.
Okay, yeah.
And she took one of my old Strats and retuned it for the event thing.
Yeah.
And she's like, here you go. I'm just like, oh my God, what do I do with this?
Right.
And then you start figuring like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
Because all your old shit doesn't work.
Just opens up the whole world, right?
And it was just because it was her unique perspective on things.
Yeah.
And then we ended up jamming together. She's like, well, I don't jam with people.
Right. She's like, I don't jam.
I don't jam, but then we actually sort of did, which was weird, sort of trippy.
Yeah.
Because as long as you follow her, because she's on her own level, she's doing something different.
Yeah.
So if you can follow her, it works out because she's like an Edward or other people who they're just seeing something else. They see things differently.
Yeah.
Yes, I love stuff like that.
I appreciate it
because the pressure's off. Like I'm just like, honestly, there's some guitar players I watch where I'm like, and I mean the list goes on. There's the Dweezils, there's the Josh Smiths, there's the Eric Gales. You just watch them play, you're just like, let me just pull up a chair. Let me just see what's going on here. You know what I mean? And I kind of dig that, to be honest with you, because it's like it's no longer there's not an ounce of competition. It's just like, oh, this is fun. You know what I mean? So I like that. And I got to say, I put you guys. I've seen Pete demo shit, and I'm just
man, devastating.
I'm just like, I don't know what you charge, but I guarantee you they're getting their money's worth because you know what I mean? But I don't say it lightly. There's actually very few people I say that to. There's a couple. Every now and then I run across a player and I forget them. Like I'll run into certain players. I'm like, oh, that's right. I remember you're really good. But I don't say it often because I think if you hand it out too often, then it kind of devalues
loses
it. Yeah, but there's a couple. But it's interesting. And I think to bring it all full circle is that to be able to have the experience of playing on a Plexi type thing is great. And to see how it affects your playing and doing cool stuff like that. And I look forward to seeing what the next, who the next guy, like I like watching Billy Strings, the guy's banana. How about Marcus King? I mean, these guys are bananas. You know what I mean? I like watching them because it's fun to see where they put stuff, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it'll be interesting now that you take this, let's say this, or, now you're giving people access to something they really didn't have access to before. So it'll be interesting to see how this ripple goes in and affects the next person. Like I know how it affected me having Plexis because, it was always this chase and me kind of failing miserably up the hill, you know what I mean, was kind of the approach. So it'll be interesting when you get somebody and you're like, actually, here's the full experience, ba-boom, check it out. It'll be interesting to see how that affects music moving forward.
I want to see what happens when I give the brown mode to Yvette and see what she does with it. Because it'll be like, because I like it for clean, what is she going to do with it? Because she's not tied to the baggage that we are like,
right.
I just want to play Main Street good one day. One day I can play that. I just want to do that.
Yeah, right.
And then move on with my life.
Right.
But
when she gets a dirty sound, it's what she plays is really cool. Like she's just got this great, because she's got a serious appreciation of a lot of like really fuzzed out indie rock. And when she goes into that mode, it's super cool too. It's not all just clean.
But will she use ghosting or no ghosting? That's the
Oh,
question.
She's like the ghosty.
see?
She likes the dirty stuff.
Yeah,
like
just
yeah.
So here's what I think we've come to. There's team ghost, team no ghost, and there's like hashtag team no bright cap.
Team Don't Bright Cap.
Yeah, right.
That's
So I think this
I'm all about that. I like the nasty
You like the nasty stuff?
Yeah, the greasier the better. Like I said, big sonic footprints for me. I like that stuff because I would rather create something that's a thing and have somebody go, I don't want or don't like that thing. I'm good with that.
Right.
I have people that I get along greatly that are like, yeah, it's not for me. I'm like, cool. It's just when you do something that's kind of neutral and neutered, I'm like, oh, I don't.
The middle.
That's
is-
tough for me.
yeah.
For me personally, and
Yeah.
the great thing about music is it doesn't matter, and you can do whatever you want and like whatever you like, and it's all great. But for me, I like to commit. You know what I mean?
Well, I've been wrong a few times because I think during development of this, somebody asked me, I want to hear what you're working on. I'm like, I looked at them and said, oh, you're going to hate this. This is so not for you.
You're right.
And they were an AC30 player and kind of a clean player. I'm like, you're going to hate it.
Yeah.
But then I left the Variac, my clean sound up, and then he's like, oh man, there's something cool about that. I'm like, well, crap. Okay.
That aspect of this pedal, I mean, the Variac thing and just a little dirty and stuff is not worlds apart from the AC30
Yeah.
thing. I mean, the compression and the ghosting and the little bit of dirt and the, you can kind of, especially with the lower voltage.
Yeah.
It's the scary higher voltage stuff that some people might find like to be a little bit unforgiving and like to.
It's a weird thing, man, because I want to see what everyone does with it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted one for me, and I think we all want to just have one to take home and screw around with.
Yeah.
Just to sit, like I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna have to weasel. Just show me how to play Mean Streets again, and then run away with it.
Oh, he'll
Yeah.
do it. That's the script.
And he will,
right?
and he will do it.
It's nuts.
Because I'm not good at it.
Yep.
But it's one of those benchmarks.
Don't
Again,
pick
that's
that,
my
don't
baggage.
pick that fight unless you're ready to go there.
No, I know.
He'll kill it.
I know.
The Mean Street thing while we're on it.
Yeah.
You got to do the tuning.
You gotta do
So what, you tune it flat? Is that what you tune the B string flat, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay, I got to tune the whole guitar first. Because you get that steely the steely third.
I just vibrato it.
Well, and the thin kick, right? Yeah.
And it's funny, that's you're 100% right. When you listen to the record, he does not vibrato rhythm. It's just
Yeah.
right.
It's just like,
Yeah,
like and the amp
yeah.
kind of does the vowel thing. Right? And that steely in tune third thing is so magic.
I could never. And that's why I could never keep guitars in tune. So that's why everything was. It's always a little.
I do
I
too.
have to because I'd pick up a guitar. You'd be in a store, and it's always when you're in a store. It's like, hey, let me hear
always.
what you're working. And it's like, oh God, here
It's
we
a
go.
great sound though, that vibrato.
But like I just like I couldn't help it.
But then
you know?
it sounds like you.
Yeah, I guess, but it was
Friggin'
funny.
amazing vibrato.
But I went
So
back
it's
and listened
right,
to it,
yeah.
and he just would you're right, he would just throw that football right through the hoop. It was like, boom.
Right?
Oh man.
And it was so cool. It was
Okay,
part of
funny
it.
about that. I always hear the Echoplex as the middle filler. There's
Oh,
a little delay in there.
100%.
Oh yeah, it's definitely there.
The swing is coming from, I think, the delay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did
yeah.
you play it straight, which is right. You're leaving the.
Well, that song, is all
Yeah.
So it's, a lot of people might go.
Yeah. I see
not
people do
bad.
that. You didn't. You played it right if you had that thing.
It's
Yeah.
Echoplex,
It's funny that in the part that people don't realize is the Echoplexes have almost like a ducking feature.
Yeah, they will
Tempesta's got a great Echoplex, and when you play it, it leaves you alone.
It
and then you
hides under the notes and
Yeah,
you-
it hides, then you stop and it blooms out.
Yeah.
Or actually,
Yeah.
if I give you my rig, I can put reverb and an Echoplex in front.
Oh, okay.
So let's see if we can dial it in and just finish it.
Sure.
So
How
if
we
I
doing
go
for
back.
Trying to remember the riff.
So just a little reverbing is when you kind of, or where's the delay? I don't remember.
Probably a little long there. It's like 360 milliseconds is exactly what it is. So we'll know from that, you know. It should go da 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 da. Maybe a little longer. It should be da 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 da. There we go.
There it is. I'll turn it down a little bit.
That's the rhythm right there. That's perfect.
Okay, now we're distorting delays from the amp as it should be.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm now starting to realize there was so much more that meets the eye. I'm like no wonder why I could never get that sound right.
But this isn't that complicated. Yeah,
There it is.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, the whole.
Yeah.
So cool.
Oh, I
It's
love
like-
that.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and what's the rule we're breaking? We're shoving a delay into a distorted amp.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's not. Which one's the mix control on that?
Oh, right here.
Even if you pull it down a hair. That's probably perfect. Because when you pick hard, that's about perfect right there. That little skip
And then
is
the
so
cleanup.
cool.
Actually, what's our clean
Yeah,
set now?
because when you roll down, right, and it doesn't really do it then because you're not whacking the strings,
Right.
so it gets out of the way. That's the ducking.
Yeah, it's a ducking effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
So-
so much more than meets the
Now
eye.
I just want
Yeah.
Pete to play like for the next half.
Yeah,
hour.
it just says, just do your thing.
No.
dude.
I want to actually. I want to hear you play with this
Oh,
sound.
I don't know any
Because
Van
it's
Halen
different.
stuff.
Oh, you want to play Van Halen?
I
You
don't
gotta
play,
play your
Van
thing.
Halen, so here, I'll play through. So here, I'll play the same. What am I playing?
Yeah, I just wondering
So-
with that tone.
So to me, it just sounds like. It's me. It's that's the way, you know. It sounds
great.
kind of the same, but it's like. I like that. So to have the delay just helps me, if anything. So it's like to me.
Oh, I quit. That's it.
Well,
I
I'm saying
quit.
it to me. That's.
I'm not-
But it's weird. But here's the point. Now that's that.
so
Now
great.
watch. Here's the deal. Now that's your setup. See how much brighter. And then when I play this one, it's not that bright at all. It's just almost thick. No treble. Dude, hashtag
treble.
team no treble.
No
there
trouble.
you go.
Take your mic.
Right? It's so weird that you guys play. Like when I hear it, it sounds natural. When I play it, like I would hear that and freak out if I had that high end on there.
I wore my No Bozo shirt in the honor of today, and you need one of these, but it says no treble.
No treble.
Dude, you're no trouble.
No treble. Maybe I think it's that Blackmore stuff.
All presents,
Maybe,
no
you know.
trouble.
He had that, he had that real tight, like, you know, it was almost like a weird, like, violin-y type thing. You know what I mean? He just had that. Maybe it was the fight in the Strats, or
Actually,
I
you
don't
know,
know.
I do have two test riffs here. Let me see that thing, and I will show you the.
Okay, which rig? What do you do? Take this one.
The bright rig.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter, but there's if I turn this off, like one of my test riffs is. Burn is one.
Oh yeah.
If I on the right guitar, those are a couple of the things I will see.
Here, let me see that guitar. See,
should
but
do
here's,
it, yeah, 'cause-
but here's the crazy part. Watch. Now, when I play that thing, it'll be way. This is a totally different, like.
Still sounds like, yeah. We'll take guitars.
Oh, dude, yeah. You want to go for the...
Sure. Sure.
Now watch, he'll play it, it'll sound. It's
heavier strings in mine. Yeah, it's cool. This is cool. Wow. Look at this black binding. This is awesome.
They blinged it out. The problem is there's so much bling in the neck I can never find where I'm at.
Oh, yeah, that's true, right?
It's
I've got a
a-
guitar that's got a bird's eye in black, and I can't see it because I can't see for anyway. On a good day, I can't see.
I'm literally going to have those things swapped out. I'm just going to put bright ones in there. It just sounded great. That was.
Yeah.
You know,
It does sound good.
although I think, honestly, I think
right.
we got to grade Pete on a curve because let's be honest, everything he plays magically comes out sounding pretty damn good. I think there's I think there's some voodoo magic going on. I don't know.
Listen to this, the mutual admiration at society.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
great.
Dude, I grew up
Oh,
listening. I mean,
thinking-
his records were like,
No,
to me, I was like,
I
listen to
agree
this
totally.
guy.
We may have to ban Pete from playing product stuff. It's getting tough,
And on that note, gentlemen, I guess we should bid adieu to everyone.
Well, thanks everybody
and say,
for giving us their time.
First and foremost, Pete, James, Blues, thank you so much for doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, words of huge wisdom from these guys, nothing from me. So listen to these three guys, enjoy, get this pedal, and tell us if you are in Team Ghost Note or not, and tell us if you're in Team Bright Cap or not. See ya!